All right.
How about now,
guys?
Catch me outside.
Check.
Check.
Mic check.
Corner Herman.
Yay! Oh, all right. The video dropped. Awesome. Fuck, it did.
Oh, watch your language. What might have happened. If you have books at home, you can follow along with me. Awareness is almost a third-person perspective, in that it's not directed, almost detached from fact.
Keep going, bro.
I don't know. It's pretty
good now.
Pretty deep down the rabbit hole.
All right. Jay says we're good. Holy cow. I'm spent.
8:05, right on the dot.
Yeah, buddy. It's Eastern time, right?
Yes.
Mountain time.
Something like
professional operation. We got this.
We got this. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Three Gun Show. This is our first kind of live. We're trying really hard here live. This is our first live show with a live audience. Live audience, everybody say. And we are also doing our first roundtable book review of Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals by Brian Enos. And here with me, Bill Corcoran. How you doing, Dave? Good. How you doing, bud? Doing good. And also Nick Miller.
Hello.
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
I'm happy to be here too. So Nick, thank you for hosting. This is Nick's amazing reloading room that we're sitting in right now. And turn your line down just a touch. Thanks, HP Jeep. How about now? All right, so we had a little stutter start with the live stream here, but we're figuring it out, and we are here to talk about practical shooting beyond fundamentals. Let's get a little bit of your background first, though, Bill. Let's introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your shooting career.
So. Actually started shooting years ago as a kid. Got into a little bit more in law enforcement. Spent 13 years in law enforcement. After a 5-year military career, I was an ordnance officer in the Army, so very familiar with firearms. But got into three-gun. I guess it's been about 4 years ago now. Just kind of got back into it. Wanted to get back into action shooting and not just stand in one place punching holes in the target. It's where I met Nick. We were going to a local three-gun match and just kind of ended up going at the same time and progressing along that route. As so many people, just got addicted to it. And now, that's what we do. That's where I spend most of my time and energy, effort, and money is going into the three-gun sport.
All right, good. And we met at Blue Ridge.
We did,
right? In Kentucky. That's where I met you too, Nick. Yeah. And we were on the same squad for nearly 2 stages.
Yeah, almost.
Wait, no, 2.5. 2 1/10 of a stage. Before I
you left.
Yeah, before I left.
You left early.
I'm gonna go do some laundry, guys. You guys continue without me. So Nick, tell us a little bit about your background and your shooting career as well.
So I started shooting as a kid. Grew up in Texas and in the country.
So you had to shoot.
So I was forced to shoot. Shooting 22s, shooting practice, and just always enjoyed it. And then kind of got into maybe a little more shooting when I was in law enforcement. And always wanted to do something from a competition standpoint, but never really did till I moved to Houston. And like Bill said, moved down here, and we were trying to find a place to live. And my wife's like, you got to get out of the house and go do something. It's driving me nuts. So I saw something on YouTube. I was like, man, those guys are running around shooting rifles and shotguns and pistols, and that looks like a blast. So did some search and found a range up in North Houston and went out there. And I think Bill and I were it was our first match at this range, and it was our first three-gun match. And actually going back and watching video of it's pretty painful.
Meet each other at that match?
I think we did. That was
and it was the same with Mike and Land too. It was weird. I mean, we all went to this match, and it was all our first match. But anyway, so started shooting that, and that was about 4.5 years ago.
4 years.
And man, just got sucked in.
Yeah.
Full force.
Yeah, no kidding. You built this structure based on three-gun.
Yeah.
This is the house that Nick built that we're standing in right now.
Yep. Because of three-gun.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I actually met my shooting buddy Bill at my first match as well, and it was his first match too. Oh,
It's funny. I mean, it's where that camaraderie that comes from having that shared experience.
Yeah.
And obviously the pursuit. I mean, 3 guns hard, right? I mean, it's tough. And having that continuous, improvement and constantly trying to get better at something, but having, you brought it up on the, some of the posts leading up into this was the idea of having a shooting partner, somebody that's going to, kind of hold you accountable and, make you smell their shotgun or whatever the hell it was you were doing.
It smelled
So
really
it's just,
good.
yeah, it did. It smelled like victory,
like
right? Yeah.
berries or victories, kind of the same thing.
Victory berries?
Victory berries.
Well, it's it's
Weird.
like that shared experience
It's like
that really
a
builds that
fruit snack, victory berries.
victory berries and in your shotgun. So I mean that's I think it's interesting when you find people who meet through this sport, how strong those friendships become and how long they last.
Yeah. I was talking to David Power a couple of days ago when I was in Kentucky, and he said the same thing. He's like, there's people that I've seen 3 times a year, and they're my best friends.
Right.
And it's just been like the last, for him, like 10 years. But, the people I go around to matches and I see in Kentucky, like I saw you guys there, showed up at Mike and Land's match in Navasota, and then there you guys are standing there. It's like, hey,
I know you.
You know 'em, right?
what's up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. So it's kind of a theme in this book as well because Brian Enos he was like shooting buddies with Rob Latham,
Right.
And he references him quite a bit in different spots. And I don't know if it's the same in. So I listened to this book twice, once to and once from Kentucky, but I'm not sure if it's the same in here. But he mentions him first and last name both times.
Yep.
Yeah?
It is.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
It-
kind of funny. Also, the
guess
audio guy
notoriety-
doesn't know how to pronounce Rob Latham's name.
No, it's a little off.
It was
But
Latham and Latham. So, well, guys, let's get right in. There's an opening to this once we get past all the safety stuff and once we get past all the introduction parts. There's an opening to this that is pretty like existential. It's higher level than most people think, and from all the people that I hear that said like, look, I just couldn't finish the book, or tried to read it and it didn't work out. It's
a tough read.
well, it's funny because like that tough read is this much of the book. If you're on the podcast, sorry, but the rest of the book is just what you would expect from a practical shooting book, and it talks about mechanics and grip and stance and stuff like that. So usually in books, well, I'll just read this passage here and then we'll get started. So this is like the final couple sentences of like the very first section, second paragraph of the book. If you can be aware of what's happening as you are shooting, not analyze it, judge it, or consciously try to change it, just be aware of what you are doing and what you're seeing. There is no limit to your potential. And that's kind of hard to hear from someone who's just like, well, I just want to go out and shoot some steel or punch holes in paper, So that could be like why people get turned off. And to me, like this book is written backwards from anything else that you would normally expect.
And he says that in the book, too.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you go out to the range and when you take a class or when you read a book or when you watch a DVD, it's all mechanics. And then somewhere along the line, and he mentions it in the book here too, you decide like, oh, I need to know about the mental game. And there was a really great line when he said like, you begin to obsess over the mental game. And I found myself doing that quite a bit too, but so
Likewise.
yeah. So Bill, what did you think when you read that first section and going into it? Because I know you have a unique perspective on mental performance.
The kind of the irony there was the idea of not the mechanics, right? And the mechanics is always the easy sell. If you're trying to improve something, if you're trying to encourage something, the mechanics is always the easy sell. It's the silver bullet. It's the solution to everything, right? I teach trading in the stock market, and people are always looking for that one technical indicator or that one setup that's going to work all the time. And there isn't one, right? And so you get to a point where you learn the mechanics, and it was great in the book how Brian talks about, you learn the mechanics. You have to learn them. You got to learn the footwork. You got to learn the sight prep. You got to learn the grip. But once you've learned those things, that only takes you so far. what takes you to that next level in any pursuit of success is the mindset, right? That being able to do what he talked about, being present in the moment, and having almost that third-party, dispassionate observer view of yourself while you're shooting, that you're just shooting, right? Once you've learned the movement, once you've learned the grip, once you've learned the trigger prep, that now it just becomes being aware. And I thought the discussion that he goes into in that chapter on the difference between awareness and focus, right, was critical.
Yeah,
because we always talk about focus on the front sight, focus on the front sight. Where is your focus? Your focus is important, but what is more important is to be aware of your focus, to be aware of what you're doing. And it was interesting as I was, I read the book years ago, and then when, you contacted me about this, and I was like, well, yeah, I'd go through it again, and started going through it again, and it just struck me, and went back out to the range, and you and I talked about this, going back out to the range, and how it changed your shooting, right? Now, all of a sudden, it was, just relax, just shoot. Stop being so tense, and it was the tension that he talks about. And it's taking that idea of a skill set and turning that skill set into a mindset. And that was really struck me because it's so similar to, success in the stock market, success in business. That was pretty good. You probably want to write that down. That idea of taking the basics, once you have the basics, once you understand the fundamentals, it's the execution of those fundamentals.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't matter if you're coaching kids in Little League or if you're coaching shooters or you're coaching, investors in the market. Execution of the fundamentals is the thing that makes the difference.
Right.
And I think we get all wound up on, just the fundamentals and not the execution of them. And that's what struck me in that first, really that forward. And it was, I said it earlier, you're going through and you're listening to or reading it, and I was like, this is like the colonel in the Men Who Stare at Goats, right? I mean, this is the guy who's just at a completely different level, talking about stuff. I was like, whoa, I mean, this guy is like out there.
Yeah.
But it made sense.
Well,
it took it to that level.
Yeah, it's interesting, and this is the first thing I've seen, and maybe it's just where I'm looking, but it's the first thing that I've seen outside of things where you're actually looking for that mindset that mentions that sort of mindset. Like you would expect that from like a yoga manual or some sort of like mindset type thing or self-help book or something. But when you lead off with that, it's like you're almost weeding out like a lot of people who are either not prepared for that, not ready for that, or unable to accept that sort of thing. It's kind of funny because I've been, every time I tell the audience like, hey, we're going to be doing this book club, I'll go back to Amazon and grab that link and put it out there like, hey, buy this book and read it with us. And Amazon tells you when you bought it. And I bought this in like 2012.
Really?
And I haven't read it until now. Yeah.
Did you try to read it at all, or did you just shelve it?
I shelved it.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, I basically shelved it, and it's funny because when I was this last oh man, I forgot to mention something interesting. But anyway, so this last March and April, when I was cleaning out like my house and like paring down everything and getting ready to go out into the world and just shoot 3-gun and everything, I've got like this whole shelf full of books, and I was like, okay, I'm taking the Enos book, I'm going to take this book here and that book there, and I roll with like 3 books, and I'm like, oh, I'll read these when I'm on the road, and still didn't freaking do it until like a year later. So it's kind of embarrassing that it took me that long to get to it, but it's amazing that for me, I probably wasn't ready in 2012 to read that. When
I think you have to hit a certain point, before you're actually ready to read this book.
I mean, I read it probably around the same time, probably 2009 or 10. And again, you said it's almost like he was trying to weed out the people who weren't ready. It's beyond fundamentals, right? I mean, it's even in the title. So you're going beyond the fundamentals. I was looking for the fundamentals.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the very first chapter, I'm reading this, and I'm like, this guy, I don't know
so
what he's...
far out there.
I mean, that's not even... This isn't even about shooting. And, and it's not. And that's the key to this book, is it's not about shooting, but it is.
But again, it's this first part, right?
Right.
Eventually he gets into, like,
he does, but
trigger
he keeps bringing it back to that. It was interesting. It's like you said. He even talks about how he wrote the book backwards, right? So all the stuff about trigger weight and about the setup on the gun and the compensators and all of the technical stuff was the last chapter.
Yeah.
Right? The first chapter was all this stuff about the mindset, and this time around, I was ready for that. I mean, that was ready to be absorbed because the skill sets are there, right? I mean, if you've shot 3-gun, if you've shot USPSA for any amount of time, you've either learned or you just really suck. So you either learn the fundamentals or you're just not there yet, right? And you've got to learn them. But if you've learned them, what takes you to that next level, right? And that was the thing that I was grasping for. That was the thing that I was looking for, is how are these guys getting to that level? How do you look at the Horners, you look at the Jerry Michelicks, you look at, Lena shooting, and how do they get to that point?
Speaking of
And
Jerry,
it's so much.
I got there was a passage that I read that I was like, oh man, that is almost exactly something that came out of Jerry's mouth when he and I were talking. But and I'll read that in just a moment here. But first, Matt Kupica says, I read that shit right when I started. And then breaks off. If I revisit it, I would probably get a whole new message now.
I'm sure you would.
True. And Matt, if you want to include in there what you got from it to begin, we'll go ahead and read that, because this is going to be a participatory thing. We'll be going to the comments here on the people that are watching live on YouTube, and and we'll be reading their comments as well. But Bill, what you said right there, in the first part of the book, he's talking about the shooting tents, and he says, awareness in shooting comes from observation without thought. Awareness leads to action without thought. And that reminds me, I was shooting with Jerry Michelik in Missouri at Generation 3 gun. And when he was done with his stage, I'm getting ready to go up. He's putting his stuff back on the table. And I was like, so how'd it go? And he's like, started thinking out there. Bad things happen when you start thinking. Yep.
Isn't that amazing? I mean,
Very true. It really is, yeah.
People all come to the same place through different routes, and it's just Brian Enos articulates it.
Yeah.
Right. He just put
very,
it into
very
a
well.
book.
Yeah.
So.
And that's another thing I wanted to mention about Brian Enos is like he's talking about like all these different concepts, and I'm wondering, and it's a lot of the stuff that we've heard before, right? Milking the gun, driving the gun, stuff like that. And because I came at this in this game like 2011, I've wondered is like, did he create the vernacular? Like, is this where it came from? Is this the gestation? Like, is this the origin story?
It's got to be pretty close.
Or was he just did he create those words, or was he just documenting like what's being said on the range at the time? That's kind of an interesting thought I had as I was driving at like 3 a.m. through Texas.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's been shooting for a long time, and to be able to articulate it like he does, I think he just has the ability, and like he references, where it's almost an out of body experience.
Yeah.
So I think he's just very skilled at being able to put words on paper, because there's no way in hell I'd be able to articulate it like he can. I mean, I read this first passage twice, and I listened to an audiobook probably 3 times. And I think this is the most complex chapter.
Yeah.
But I think it's also the most important chapter.
Absolutely. And it's like freaking gold is what it is.
Is.
And
every time you read it
for it.
Yeah.
If you're ready for it. If you're not ready for it, you're going to know because you won't make it through the chapter.
No.
Right.
Because every time you read it, you pick up something else. I mean, there's always a little piece that you can grasp onto, and apply to a situation or circumstance that you had on the range. And for me, I mean, it was very, very helpful. Well,
maybe like Kupica brings up is, maybe revisit that thing either every off season or every couple of years or something like that to see if there's anything else that you pick up from it.
Yep. Yeah, because like you said, I mean, if you read it at the beginning, I mean, there's stuff in here that you're not going to know. You're going to read it, and you may glaze over it. You're not going to know how to apply that to maybe what your struggle is or what's holding you down at that point.
Yeah.
You're just going to bypass that and go on to the Section 2, Section 3, which gets more into the fundamentals. But the Section 1, the awareness and focus, for me, reading it, I was after shooting for 4 years and feeling like I was kind of going into a lull. I think this really helped me get back on track on focus and not overthinking stages.
Yeah, and we're going to be shooting in your backyard tomorrow, and I'm pretty excited
Yes.
to put some of this stuff into work because, like you said, it reaches you where you're at, in the place that you're at the time, and there's areas that stand out to me that probably didn't stand out to other people. Like one of the things, when he's talking about the difference between awareness and focus, he mentions the front sight thing. I've heard that from a lot of terrible shooters in the past. It's like, just focus on your front sight. It's like, okay, just shut up. But the other thing is, like, I've always thought that, I was like, it's really weird. Like, I have a lot of visual exclusion when I shoot. Like, I'm concentrated on the array I'm on, and, it's like I'm shooting through a little tunnel, And I've always thought, like, oh, well, it's true what all the self-defense people say. It's kind of just a microcosm of that sort of thing. But in this, it's like I need to work on that. Like I need to broaden my awareness to
get out of that tunnel vision to get more of a broad.
Well, and like Kupika brings up there, just like the when you're driving a car, there's people in lanes next to you that they're there, but they're not necessary to be your focus right now, and sort of thing. And I was noticing I was hyper aware as I was driving because he's talking about that, like how easy it is for me to drive and to make all that stuff happen.
Almost subconsciously.
Yeah.
And that's really what he gets to is that idea of, when he gets into the chapter on creative shooting, and we'll get there, when we get to that chapter, but it's that idea of taking it to that subconscious level where you're not consciously thinking. You don't consciously focus on the front sight. You don't consciously open up your awareness. And, when you were talking about the tunnel vision in law enforcement, I mean, we were all taught. I mean, we were put under stressful scenarios so that you got used to that. You got used to dealing with that. And it was kind of funny. Yeah, exactly. It was no donuts. Well, now you're totally
crazy.
stressed.
Now what do we do?
Now you're stressed. So it was, you were put in there so that you would know what was happening when it happened. And what was interesting, I mean, the first time I got shot at, tunnel vision, I mean, you see one thing. I mean, that's it. You don't even hear anything. The time slows down. Everything's just, if you've been in a car wreck, everything slows down. You get that tunnel vision. And that's an effect of the adrenaline. And it was interesting when he talked about, for me, one of the big things in here was the tension, right?
Yeah.
And if you lose that tension, right away your vision opens up, right? I mean, it's a physiological response to adrenaline. It's a fight or flight, after all. And so, in mixed martial arts and martial arts of any kind, boxing, if you get that tunnel vision, you're going to get clocked.
Right.
I mean, you just are. So you'll hear fighters and their coaches in the corner telling them, relax, breathe. The guy's on the bottom, he's getting the crap beat out of him. He's got a big cut over his, catching elbows and all kinds of stuff. And they're like, breathe, relax. And you're like, what are these people crazy? But that's exactly what you have to do, because you've got to be able to see that armbar coming at you, the opportunity for an escape. Same thing with the shooting. If you feel that tunnel vision, now, there's tension somewhere. I'm tense somewhere. I need to lose that tension. And when you lose that, you begin to shoot. And I started, working this into my routines, and I would feel the tension and then let that tension go, and it was astonishing how much faster my times got, how much more accurate my shots got. And almost immediately, I'd go right back to being tense, right? Because it's a conditioned response, and losing that
there's an explosion
tension,
going off.
There's an explosion, right? I mean, that big loud pop causes that adrenaline rush.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to putting that into into action as well, is less tension. So I'll be honest, like when I started this, like I came into it from like I'm going to go shoot 3 guns so I can become familiar with my self-defense weapons in case the shit hits the fan or whatever, And so a lot of my exposure in fundamentals and how to shoot came from the Magpul DVDs, right? And if you watch anything Chris Costa does, and I met him, and he's the exact same way in life. He does everything just super intense, and their whole thing was like smash that pistol just as
through the target,
hard as you can, push it straight out, get your head down, scrunch up, and stuff like that. And that's how I shot. And slowly over time, I've relaxed to like a more upright shooting posture.
It makes such a big difference.
It really does. It really does. And then when you're down like this, also now everything's in your face. Like your arms are in your vision, your biceps are in your vision, stuff like that. And well, maybe not yours. Yours are kind of small, but
they are.
But
I don't want to say anything.
Sorry, Bill.
That's why I have to shoot like this.
But Oh, and that's another thing, is locking out your arms versus having like some less tension in your arms. So just that, the relaxation that I've naturally done, I'm looking forward to having, more relaxation going forward, like as I'm, aware of like how tense I'm being.
Well, and for me, the tension part that was probably my biggest takeaway in this book. Like we said, we started shooting about 4 years ago, and you kind of develop your own technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you progress in the shooting sports, your stance changes, your presentation changes, and I noticed that I was becoming more tense. Well, but I didn't notice it until I read this book, and I think it was a 3-nation regional, the Southwest Regional this year.
Yeah, we were talking about that,
and
and I was like, oh, okay, I haven't read the book yet, but
yeah, cool. It was eye-opening for me. Actually, Jay Christensen, he shoots our local match, and he goes, man, I've never seen you so amped up, and that's just, I think, the progression that I was on, and I was getting more and more amped up, and part of that was trying to anticipate the buzzer going off and knowing which targets I'm going to take, and you could just feel that tension in your shoulders, you could feel it in your arms, you could feel it in your stomach and your core, and you go back and watch some of the videos, and really a progression of videos, and you can see that my stance, my posture became more aggressive. Mm-hmm. So I was leaning forward, I was arching my shoulders forward, which what Brian Enos talks about, when you do that, you just create this tension. And so your draw stroke is slower, and then because of that tension, what's your mind thinking of?
Yeah.
I mean, you're thinking of something, and you shouldn't be thinking of anything, right?
Well, it's the cat analogy that he gave.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by reading this, and again, like Matt said, somebody starting out reading it, they may glaze over that because that's not a problem that they're having. Mm-hmm. There may be another takeaway, but for me, that was my biggest takeaway. And so keeping my back straight, relaxing my core, and I found, and I didn't even realize it, that I was carrying so much tension in my 12-pack that...
Pony keg. Nice try, though.
But as soon as I straightened my back, dropped my shoulders back a little bit, and it was a world of difference for me. It was like somebody turned a light on. And it has made, not only from a physical standpoint of tension, but a mental standpoint too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's allowed me to kind of clear my mind. I know that sounds pretty up here, but it really did.
Totally true. Did you check any of your times? Did you look at your splits or draw times at all after doing it?
I have not.
I did, and it was amazing.
Really?
The difference it made.
Yeah, I mean, Brian specifically says, like, you cannot have a fast draw when you're tense and ready to draw.
You can't.
Which is what I try to do.
I mean, it's any combat sport, right? I mean, you watch guys who are good at it, they're loose, they're relaxed. You watch Anderson Silva fight, he's relaxed, he's almost goofing off. And yet, out of nowhere, you get these accurate shots. And it's the same idea of just losing that tension, and it's being aware of where it's at. Nick talks about holding a lot of the tension in the core. I found it was all in my shoulders, right? So, I mean, I was this,
That's me, too.
And knowing that and letting that go and just relaxing a little bit before you shoot. And now, you progress to the point where it's not, now can I do that through a string? Right? Can I do that through a string of shots? Can I now carry that through a stage? And what struck me is, in reading that section, is all of the great three-gunners that we get the opportunity to watch and to squad with, right? These guys that are just, and gals that are amazing shooters, every one of them has mastered that. Mm-hmm. You look at it, you don't see a single one of them that is tense, that is jacked up, that looks like a caged lion before the match. They're relaxed. They go through their routine, and everybody does things a little different, but to a person, all the top-tier shooters are relaxed when they approach that line. They've already got the plan in their mind. They let their subconscious mind guide their conscious effort. And again, you're talking high-level stuff here. And that's why this first chapter, I thought it was great, and I thought, as an author, it was brilliant to put that in there and really weed out the people. Nope, you're not ready for this yet, right? So.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it. It is brilliant to put it that way. Jay Christensen says, you were wound up like crazy.
And I was. Both at the Three Gun Nation Regional and the Extreme match.
the Extreme
I mean, you could just feel it. It's like, I got to run fast. I got to do this fast. And that doesn't work.
I find myself screwing up a lot of stuff when I'm like in the, I got to do this fast. You know?
And it's a difference of, you shoot a local match where you don't put that as much pressure on yourself, and then you go to a major, and it's like, okay, I've got to perform. And so you amp yourself up, and it does nothing but tear you down.
Enos even says, it's the practice practice attitude. Yeah, practice attitude versus match attitude. He's like, I'm the same person I am in practice as I am in the match.
And if you can do that, if you can master that, that is huge.
I mean, that's the whole performance idea of, you typically you get 60 to 70% in competition of what you practice in practice. And a big part of that, 60 to 70%, is the mindset, right? So if you're practicing for any sport, you practice, you get 60 to 70% of that on game day. That's why you see the fumbles on game day. That's why you see, the problems on game day. When I was training retrievers, we would train at 150 to 180% of what was expected on the day of the match because we knew we were only going to get 60% of what we trained for.
Right.
And what Enos talks about is changing the mindset so that you practice the mindset that you should have in the match. Right, and that's why I said, now it's the point where, okay, I know I can relax before the first shot. Right, I've gone through the drills that he talks about, the shoot one, holster, shoot two, and try to maintain that focus and awareness of your sights. Now can you do 5 or 6 shots? Can you do 5 or 6 targets? Can you do 5 or 6 targets moving from one to the other? And what I'm finding, and what I'm finding is that it's tough because you get 1 or 2 and you're like, oh, I got this.
Especially if you start missing, right? Or something screws up, and then
worse yet, you'd start doing good, right? You start nailing it. You're like, I got this. What Jerry talks about, admiring your own work, and you're like, all right, well, I got 2 plates down on the rack, and then emptied 4 magazines to get the rest. Right. I mean, it's that building that out and practicing that calmness and that's really where I think the rubber meets the road is, can you do what's in this book
consistently?
And that's where it's changed how I practice so that it changes how I execute, right? So now the practice isn't just about setting up stages and running around at full speed and trying to get it knocked out. It's about practicing the calmness, about practicing the change in the attitude and the awareness, and as he talks about, shooting in the present tense.
I think that makes me think that a lot of ground can be gained in ingraining that into your dry fire practice as well, when instead of like just focusing like laser on that, small little lipstick target that you have on your wall and just like, I'm going to crack off a dry shot, on that as fast as I can, more of like, being aware, like opening your awareness. There's also these other targets on the wall. There's also this and that whole thing. So it's widening that awareness and not necessarily just focusing on those little things.
Well, and that's he talks about in the book of if you go to the range and it's live fire, don't shoot at targets. Just shoot into the berm because you'll get focused on that target. You may not see the sights. And for me, I never even thought about that. I mean, when I go to the range, it's, all right, we're going to set up some paper, set up some steel, and I'm going to shoot them.
Yeah.
So to shoot into the berm, to really cause yourself to be in the moment, to see that sight lift, I mean, that was a big change for me.
Well, so that, let's expand on that a little bit and visit that just a moment here. So that is what he's talking about, of like watching your sides, watching them lift, watching what they do in recoil and bringing them back down. I've heard that I've heard that multiple times of we got to stop watching the chat. Bunch of hooligans in there.
Because there's a smart aleck.
Idiots. So where was I? Oh, I've heard that multiple times, but I've never actually put that into my practice because in my mind, like, that's wasted ammunition.
Yeah,
so that's ammunition that I could be putting into the A zone. I could be building a group with that. But I personally have never seen my sights lift or anything. So,
I mean, I think seeing the sights lift, like he talks about, seeing it come out and then come back in, and then even going one step further and seeing the muzzle flash. I mean, you talk about awareness. I'm not there.
Yeah.
I haven't reached that Jedi state yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even get to the point, or aren't to the point and don't know it yet, that they're not blinking on the, you know, as soon as the round goes off, they break that shot, they blink.
Right.
It's a natural reaction. You can't see the sight come out of the notch if you're blinking.
Right.
Just that level of awareness alone, those little things that, you know, especially for a new shooter, right? Imagine if you started out with doing nothing but, like you said, shooting a berm. I like that when I was like, I can hit a berm, I can do that, right? But
Most of the time.
Most of the time. But if you're aware of that, if you're starting with that level of awareness, and then you move over to the target, I mean, it would change.
But I don't think a new I mean, unless you're just Billy Badass, it's going to be hard for a new shooter to start out with that level of awareness because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so to start with that,
well, and that's why the fundamentals, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you start at the back of the book, and then you come back and hit the first, and then you do it again. But
yeah, it definitely takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, there's no question. And then, you know, you start applying that to things like shotguns. I was shooting slugs yesterday, you know, and you start watching the bead now coming up off the shot. And, I mean, you can apply what's being taught in this book from a mindset perspective to everything in 3-gun.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. So I was looking at this book and the first couple chapters and thinking to myself, like, this could be applied to anything. If you take shooting out, if you take gun, if you take pistol, front sight, this is like a manual for life.
It's the same, and he talked about it. There's references in here to golf. There's references in here to martial arts. So, yeah, I mean, you could apply it to your relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch the front sight.
But don't focus on it.
Come out of the notch.
Become awareness.
Is this their kids in the show?
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Well, you and I talked about it a little bit, Dave, a couple days ago.
Yep.
When, you know, we were discussing that this book is like a self-help book for shooting.
Yeah.
Right? And, I mean, one of the things that I do in coaching and teaching people how to trade in the stock market, we focus a lot on the mindset. And it's amazing because you'll have people who, I can take two traders with the same level of experience and the same amount of money and put them in the same trade at the same minute and then let them go. One of them is going to make money on that trade, one of them is going to take a loss. And the only thing that separates the two is the way they look at it, the way they think. And it's the same in trading as it is in martial arts. It's the same in shooting as it is in driving. You know, Matt's comment about that idea of subconsciously, you know, operating a vehicle, a very complex process. How many times have you driven to work and you don't remember getting there? Right? You pull in the office and you're like, man, I don't remember. That's kind of scary. I don't remember driving.
Yeah.
And when your shooting gets to that point, I think that's where you see the Michelicks and the Horners and, you know, the people who are just at that level that it seems so effortless. Right? You know, I mean, you watch Horner run a stage, and if you've ever squatted with him, you watch him run a stage, and you're like, that's how I'm going to do it, right? And you get up there, and there's shotgun shells everywhere, and like, you know, I mean, you've been littering shotgun shells, you've missed 90% of the targets.
Yeah.
It's just all the mindset.
Let's read Coop's comment about driving real quick. It's the first was a section comparing shooting and driving a car, both very complex tasks, but people condition themselves to thinking shooting is difficult when it's not. So. What were you going to say?
So I was going to say, what was I going to say? I don't know.
Driving a car subconsciously.
I don't know. Let's move on.
People put you know, and
it was probably going to be inappropriate anyway.
Come on.
Enos put, you know, he mentioned it in the a book as well. Like, people put a lot of weight in shooting and not nearly enough weight into the other things that we do that are complex, like riding a bicycle, for example. You know, you just have like a ton of experience riding a bike, you know, and the experience riding a bike comes like hours at a time when you're younger, but shooting comes one split second at a time.
And it comes, again, at the disadvantage of that adrenaline dump that we all feel every time you shoot. You know, I mean, you see, I love seeing the videos on Facebook and other places where you see somebody who's shooting for the very first time, right? Somebody brings their friend who's, you know, maybe not anti-gun but not really excited about it and bring them to the range the first time. You can just see it in their face. I mean, they shoot and they're like, I like this. It's that adrenaline dump. It's the endorphins, right? But that, I think, is a big disadvantage to us as we move along, because every time you pull that trigger, every time you break that shot, you get that little adrenaline dump, and it just makes you worse and worse at the next one. And so his focus on being aware of that and combating that to the extent possible by letting that tension go, by relaxing yourself after every shot, after every, and just staying focused on the right things. When he was talking about the reloading, it never occurred to me, but I mean, when he's so detailed in his, when you come in for the reload, that you're dropping the mag, seeing the mag fall, rotating the pistol, and seeing the break between your mag well and your pistol, that you're that keenly aware of where that mag well is. You can't miss a reload when you're that aware.
Right.
When you miss a reload, when you're not even looking, right? You're trying to go fast, you're dropping stuff everywhere.
Do you think you could be that aware, though, even after reading this? And I know you're not supposed to think about being that aware, but in the heat of the moment, do you think you can be that aware to see that line in the mag
I think
well?
you can condition yourself to be. And that's, I think, where
and I know he can,
to, right?
but it's just a matter of
It's a matter of
working to get
conditioning
there.
and practicing, and it's practicing the right things, right? I mean, I tell my students all the time, it's not about practicing, it's about practicing right. If you're not practicing the execution, you're never going to execute, right? So immediately, the first time after reading that, I went out to the range and I reloaded a couple, and like the first one, I was on purpose, consciously looking for that. Second, third one, not even close, right? And so
he talks about that in the book,
exactly.
too. I mean,
so forcing that awareness in the beginning, knowing that our subconscious mind guides our conscious effort, but we have to train the subconscious mind to do it, right? And so it's through that repetition. So now every time I grab a reload, and this is one that's phenomenal for the dry fire drill, if you get in the habit of doing something right, you're in the habit of doing it right. You're going to do it right. But you have to break the old habits, right? So dry fire drills, just hundreds and hundreds of reloads that I've been working on, just coming in, being aware of that. And it's amazing how much easier the reload is when you're focused on something that's not really reload related, right? I mean, you're just looking for that line, you're looking for that break, and boom, and next thing you know, you're back on target. So I think in time, right now, no. Right? I mean, I guarantee you, when I go shoot the He-Man match, I'm going to be freaking amped up, and I got to work on those things, right? Because I'm like a caged animal before I go to the line on a stage. And I have to work on that because my adrenaline's like through the roof. But if you practice those things, I think if you, again, it's if you practice it all the time, then, how you do anything is how you do everything. So you practice it and repeat it over and over. And then a lot of it's just experience.
Let's tie that into to mindset. That you were talking about your students and how you can put two of them in the same situation, completely different outcome. How do you train them to have a proper mindset?
A lot of it is undoing the improper mindset, right? Unless you were trained to be rich by rich people, you were trained to be rich by broke people, and that's just the reality of it. What we're taught by our parents, grandparents, teachers, preachers, and coaches about wealth is holding you back from becoming wealthy. It just is. So you've got to untrain that negative mindset, that stinking thinking that holds people back.
Stinking thinking.
That was a good one.
I was going to write that one down.
The whole idea behind it is we've got to reprogram the subconscious mind. So just as an example, have you ever heard that wealthy people are greedy?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we had an administration who for 8 years banged that drum that wealthy people were greedy. It's nonsense. Wealthy people are among the most giving people in the world. I mean, they give more to charity and are a smaller percentage of the population, but they give more to charity than anybody else does. It's just utter nonsense. But if you were taught that growing up, and all of a sudden you decide, well, I want to be wealthy, well, your subconscious mind is going to snap into action and go, whoa, hang on a minute there, killer. We all know that greed is bad, and you don't want to be greedy, so let's do everything we can to keep you from becoming wealthy, which is greedy.
Right.
So you got to change the thinking.
How do you change the thinking?
A lot of it is through affirmations. A lot of it is through the same way that you were taught these negative things. You were taught because people said them to you, and you repeated
over and over and over again
and
for
over and over.
years.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough.
And doggone it, people like me. Yeah, they do. That'd be a good one. You should do that.
I do it every day.
Do you? Okay,
Yeah.
it shows.
in the
Sorry,
on deck
continue.
box.
So it's what you say to yourself, and a lot of what Nick's talking about there. Do you think that you can get to a point where you're seeing those things in competition? Has to happen by untraining the negative things that we've built up to now. And you were talking about being real tense and your shoulders up and just attacking the stage. Well, I have yet to have a stage shoot back at me, right? So there's no real reason for us to get that amped up.
Self-induced stress.
It is.
Totally is.
And so by training it and practicing it and saying it to ourselves over and over and over, you begin to reprogram that. And reprogramming the subconscious is what lets you improve in the conscious. Your subconscious mind guides your effort every single day. If you don't believe that, how do you think you got to work and you can't remember how to get there, right? It literally does. And Enos talks about it in the book about how in stage planning, he'll go through and he has his stage plan, but before the stage, he's not thinking about his stage plan anymore. He lets the subconscious guide him through the conscious effort of executing the stage.
That's when he starts talking about creativity and shooting.
Creative shooting. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at that point, there's nothing else you can do to prepare yourself for that stage. You've done everything you can, and at that point, you just got to
just execute.
Just shoot.
Yeah. Well, there's a paragraph that stood out to me about creativity, but before we get there, PMO 1904 has a question for you, Bill. Are you breaking down your practice into micro steps in order to train the subconscious, or are you training one fluid step?
So micro steps. So exactly what we're talking about
micro steps are real quick.
with the reload. Enos talks about as you're coming in from that reload, breaking that down and being aware of where your focus is. Well, it's interesting. What he's doing is he's causing a derivative focus. He's causing you to be focused on something that's not exactly related to the task at hand. The same reason that people will, you listen to music when you're lifting. Right, you're executing the lifting, you're listening to the music. It takes your mind off of it. But by focusing on that line in the magwell, you're not focusing on, I got to get this magazine into the magwell, right? You're focusing your attention on one specific thing, and then you're executing that. And so breaking it down into micro steps might be, for example, when I come from the shoot, how do I reach my mag release, right? Do I rotate my hand? Breaking down those little steps and being aware of what each one of those is, and then focusing on that one thing, and then trying to do it twice.
And I think you take those micro steps and you put them all together, right?
Exactly.
So you have to start with micro steps. It's like loading a shotgun, right? So you're not going to just load 4.
Right.
You've got to have your shotgun. If you load weak hand or strong hand, you've got to know, all right, am I going to turn it over? What's the angle that I'm going to have it at? Because if it's too far, I load weak hand. So if it's too far to the left, it's going to be an awkward load for me. If it's too far to the right, I'm going to be going too far across. You've got to have all the angles right. So once you get that and you're comfortable with it, then it's the grab, right? How to grab those shells. And then it's the load. How am I bringing my hand across the receiver? And so then once you're able to identify all those steps, then I think you put it all together, maybe at a 50% to 70%, and then full speed, and see how it works out for you. At least for me, that seems like how those micro steps are able to culminate into training.
Well, and Bill, you're a CrossFitter too, and that's one thing that we always did was break things down, and especially the snatch and the clean and jerk. You're talking like multiple pulls, and now you're going from the top of your knees and you're bringing it back, and then you're just doing the movement from there. So micro steps are huge in training and help you break down everything.
They do, and once you build those, right? It's a building block process. So once you've built from the real small steps, then like Nick said, you build it into an actual one movement. A reload is one movement, right? But it's not. It's like 6 basic movements that you've got to do to execute that.
Right.
But once you've practiced those 6 basic micro steps together and you master that becomes now one step.
Yeah. Well, to bring it back to the driving example, like I filled up with gas, not I got out of my truck, I opened the door, I took the cap off, I inserted my credit card, I typed in my zip code, that whole thing.
Right. It's one element, and then you put it into your training. What I liked about what Enos does in here is that it gave me a place to see when one of those breaks down, what do you do? Right? I've always been a big proponent of training skills and drills and not just going out and setting up stages. And same thing in any venture, you want to train those individual skills. But what do you do when it breaks down? right? And the first thing is you got to be aware of it. And there's so much, like, you and I had talked about your pistol shooting and how this changed it. And you mentioned you weren't even aware of it, right? It wasn't
I had no idea.
It wasn't until Jay said,
And he'd said it
"What do you
several
like?"
times. Yeah.
I mean, dropping the lattes there. I mean, the guy was like wound up. And you're not aware of it. So that's the first step to it.
And you don't know how to fix it.
Maybe
Well,
Jay's
then
your
it's-
spirit animal. Maybe he is. Really? Silence after that?
Yeah,
Okay.
because
I
So-
said
yeah.
something. I whispered.
We're going to move on to creativity. This section's called Building Creativity. And Brian writes, in the so-called learning stage, many people work hard on their fundamentals until they feel confident in the technical ability to shoot. When they find that this intellectual process often fails them at the match, they begin to get interested and sometimes obsessed with the mental aspects of performance, like we were talking about earlier. Their mistake is in separating the physical from the mental. They cannot be separate. They cannot be treated separately. You are one person, and therefore, no matter what you're doing, both mind and body are performing at once.
That's pretty deep.
That is freaking deep, dude.
I have to read it like 6 times.
Yeah, exactly. You're hitting the back 30 seconds on the audible. And,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, it's that pursuit of the silver bullet, the solution to
Yeah.
what my problem is, right? I think a lot of it, and like I said earlier, it's the easy sell, the technical skills, the do this, do that, is the easy sell, right? You're going to win every match if you stand over here. If you point your gun this way, if you do this with your offhand, and yet none of that makes any sense, because when you look at, it's great. We talked about Jerry. You asked Jerry about grip. He'd be like, just hold on to the gun and freaking shoot it. I mean, what do you think?
And there's
What are
like
you
a
talking
whole
about, right?
section on here on how to grab the gun.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, he's just at that
But he's
level.
he's at that point
He's at
where
that
he knows.
point.
And to take it a step backwards, like most people are focused on gear.
Sure.
Like, gear is the last freaking thing you should be focused on.
The further back, right?
Yeah,
I mean, now
exactly.
they're looking for the holster that's going to solve their problem. It's not the holster. It's you. Get out there and do the practice. It was.
That would be a fun thing to tell someone, just like hand on the shoulder. It's not the holster.
It's
you.
Suck
Walk
less.
away.
Suck less.
That's usually what I
Don't
tell
shoot
you.
like an asshole.
Don't shoot. Yeah. So, I mean, it's that pursuit of the silver bullet. It's the easy sell. It's one of the reasons that you got so many people out there marketing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And here you got somebody who's saying, look, it doesn't, that's not it. And if you look across all of the different shooters, Jason Thielke, he won the shoot-off at, where were we?
Vortex
At
match.
At the Vortex
Yeah,
match.
Vortex Shooter Source 3-game
And
championship.
there were some
Nice.
pictures that came out of that, and Kyle, my son, and I were looking at it, and Jason's pistol stance is like the most unorthodox, like arms bent. I'm like, I don't know how the slide doesn't hit the guy in the nose. I mean, it's just, you look at it, you're like, man, that should not work. By everything that anybody teaches, technically, that shouldn't work. And he smoked
He kills it.
everybody at that thing.
Well, and so let's talk about that. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, like, you need to push as hard as you can between your hands, squeeze it from the side, left hand hard grip, and then you've got that handshake grip with your right hand, so you can squeeze the trigger. And Enos is saying, like, no, that's
you don't.
wrong.
Just
Grip it
relax.
like a hammer, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah.
hammer a nail in. And it was interesting. I never really thought about it, but he talks about if a pistol had 2 grips, right? And if you're going to push opposing, then if you were doing that same
You're
grip,
torquing it.
then you're going to be doing this with
Yep.
it. So when you grab your pistol, it's just
Neutral.
like a neutral position. And I never thought about it till I read it. I mean, it's like you said, Jerry just said, just grab it, whatever's
grab
comfortable
your
for you.
pistol, do what works for you.
And you always heard, you want to grab with the right and support with the left and be high on the gun, which you do, but having that neutral position, and I think also that neutral position goes into tension. And for me, everything seems to go back to tension, because if you have a death grip on the gun, it's not just your hands that have that tension built up. It's in your forearms, it's in your shoulders, goes into your core, and then that just slows everything down.
Well, that reminds me of a funny story. When I took my dad shooting when I was in Utah last year, and this old range officer comes up, experienced range officer comes up, and he's telling my dad, he's like, now push real hard with your right hand and pull back with your left. And he walked away. I was like, Dad, don't do anything that guy says at all. Unless it's a
Don't
safety
work.
command, unless he shouts stop,
Because you hate old people.
because he proved himself
Oh, I see, I see.
completely illiterate to any sort of, or ignorant to any sort of
I don't hate old
shooting
people.
at all, you know?
Well, I mean, you look at guys
Well,
who are
those are-
just
true.
instinctively fast.
Right.
You know, Kyle, my son, is. If that kid would practice, I keep saying it. If he would practice, I mean, he could just kill it. He just doesn't have the passion for it. But he'll go out and he'll shoot, and he's wicked fast. I mean, it's scary, pistol or shotgun. And after reading through this, it started to dawn on me that that's why he's so fast, is because he's totally calm, totally relaxed. The kid has no adrenaline reaction to anything.
And he has a background in martial arts, right?
No, that's my oldest son.
Oh, okay.
But you look at that, and you look at people that kind of have that.
Laid back.
What's their natural tendency? I mean, you look at Nate Satchowitz, right? And he's even kill. I mean, you look at him get on the line, and I was able to shoot with him at the Vortex Shooter Source match, and he's chill. He gets up there, and the buzzer goes off, and it's like bam, 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 and he goes to town.
Yeah.
And the same with Daniel. I mean, it's just this kind of calmness that, whether that's natural or it's something that they've been able to teach themselves.
Well, with Nate, I got to say, it's probably natural,
Yeah,
right?
I think
'Cause he's
so.
so young, and he's been doing it for so long. And, you know, when I was speaking to Lance, one of the things he was saying is, you know, Nate does things that most people won't, because he doesn't know he's not supposed to be able to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and he has, like, that that benefit of not having any pressure on it, because he doesn't have, like, the ego, you know, the big word, the big ego
Sure.
that the rest of us do, you know. I've done it multiple times where I'm sitting down and I'm like, you know, not hammering a target with the rifle, and I'm thinking, like, I look like such an idiot right now. It's like, no one gives a shit. People are stuffing mags. And
They're not even paying attention.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even the guy who's supposed to be spotting for you is not paying attention.
Yep.
Yeah, well, and with the grip, you know, I mean, you look at the guys who shoot, and that was the point with Tilke. You look at it and you go, that shouldn't work.
Yeah.
You know, you look at Jerry's grip is not in any book anywhere, and yet the guy holds, you know, so many world records and is so fast and is just so because he just shoots. I mean, to me, reading through this book, people like Jerry, people like Horner that are at the very high end of the game, were the embodiment of what Enos is talking about in here. It's
Right.
just shoot. Be present in the moment. Be aware of what's going on. Make your stage plan. Submit it to your subconscious mind, and then just let go. And when you watch those guys shoot, it's what they're doing. And that's why, you know, Jerry said to you at that match, I started thinking, well, nothing good can come of that, right? I mean, you start thinking anything. Ooh, hey, I'm doing good. Well, that's it. That stage is done. You are just gonna mess that up from then on.
I'm hot shit.
All right, I'm hot. Check me out. Or like you said, man, I can't get on this target, and everybody's going to be laughing at me.
Yep.
No, they're not. They're not even paying attention.
Yep.
Right? Just shoot. Just be present.
Well, and you talk about like Tilke's stance, right? And Enos talks about stance, and, you know, do I shoot a Weaver, a modified Weaver, an isosceles? No, I mean, everybody has. I shoot in a Bill Corcoran, or I shoot in a Nick Miller. You have your own stance, and you know, he talks about natural point of aim, and that was another thing that
You know, I didn't. I caught that, and I didn't think about that.
I didn't either.
For pistol shooting.
Yeah, and you know, I'd always started both feet pretty much parallel with each other, and again, shoulders back. And when you start talking about natural point of aim, I was doing that, and I was off to the left, so I dropped my right foot back. I mean, maybe an inch, and it brought everything center. I mean, it made a big difference for me. So I mean, that's harder when you're not shooting in a box.
Yeah.
You know, and you're not going to be moving. So, you know, a lot of what he talks about is for USPSA or IPSC, and you're
Even still challenged where your natural point of aim really matters when there's
Huge.
like an array in front
yeah,
of
and
you.
you're
right?
going across and
Yeah.
you're not moving. But for 3-gun, I think you can still take that from a start if you're shooting, or if you come up on an array and you're going to shoot from a position, just know what your MPA is, and if it's natural for you to drop a foot back versus have everything squared off, just be mindful of that. And it
Right.
gets back to that kind of conditioning aspect of knowing what works for you and
And practicing it.
practicing it.
And practicing that, like the NPA, you know, like you said, it was huge, especially when he started talking about when you're getting ready to shoot, that you're set up at your NPA to your first target, and then you're indexing off of everything else, right? Instead of standing there going, okay, I want my natural point of aim to be the whole plate rack. Well, that ain't how it's going to work out, killer. I mean, you need to just focus on one target at a time. It's not the whole plate rack. You're not going to take the whole plate rack, right? And like you said, it never really occurred to you NPA with regards to pistol versus shotgun or rifle. When Briley built our shotguns, we went down there and spent a lot of time with them working on where our natural point of aim was with the shotgun, and getting the gun to fit the shooter was important, but they spent a lot of time working with us to get that natural point of aim with the shotgun. I saw it in here for the pistol. I was like, just like you. I was like, duh. Oh, I guess we shoot those too, right? I guess maybe that might be important. And again, when I started going out and working on lose the tension, relax, just draw and shoot. You know how to draw. You know how to grip. You know how to squeeze the trigger. You know how to focus on the front sight. You know how to focus target back to the front sight, back to the target. Just shoot it. Mm-hmm. But when you do that from a natural point of aim, you can almost do it, and one of the dry fire drills he talks about in here is doing it with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
That was huge. I mean, that was an eye-opener to go back to that. And that was something I learned in law enforcement 100 years ago. To be able to draw from your closed eyes closed, and then open your eyes and realize you're on the target.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, Bill, when you bring that up, one of the things that he mentions is like, just put your pistol where it needs to go. And there's so much emphasis placed on it needs to be in the exact same spot every single time, right. And you break that into your muscle memory and all that stuff, and put your magazines the same, and don't ever put it in the front. It's like, just put it where it needs to go.
Yeah, and he talks about muscle memory, that there's no such thing as muscle memory.
Yeah, clearly. Well, we got a couple comments in the YouTubes here, and if you're watching at home, go ahead and put your thoughts about the book in here, and we'll read them out for discussion. So, HP Jeep says, best advice for a newer guy, no one else is paying attention to you. Everyone else is loading mags or focusing on their own stage plan. It took me a long time to figure this out. It's very true. Even the dude that's videoing you doesn't care what you're doing. So, Kupika says, center axis relock, you noobs. I have no idea what that means. Is that Roger?
I don't know.
Picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue.
Millennial speak there. And then Rob Hall says truth, so he must know what Matt's talking about.
Must, because we don't.
Yeah.
Explain.
Well, when I think of this book, people they call it like the Practical Zen Guide to Shooting or something like that, or there's another book out there called Zen and the Art of Motorcycles, which is like a book about life, but it's also about motorcycle maintenance. I kind of feel the same way on that. And then that's the way I've always viewed it. But then when you get to the back, a lot of it is mechanics. A lot of it's like, well, this is the trigger weight you should have. This is how you should hold the pistol and stuff. So I wasn't prepared for that portion of it. And I almost think that this could be like 2 volumes.
Oh, it totally could.
Yeah. Well, and actually, that reminds me, he mentions another book that he's written a couple times in here. Have you ever seen that book?
I have not.
I have not seen it.
I've never even seen it on Amazon. Like the only one...
might be a good one for newer shooters.
Also, has Brian Enos been spotted in the wild recently?
No, I've never seen him.
Oh, yeah.
Here in Magnolia.
Well, he might have cut his hair.
And new glasses?
And new glasses.
Maybe that's why you don't recognize him.
Because of the hair and the glasses.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here we go. Matt Kupika says, center axis relock is a pistol stance technique taught by only the most tactical of the tacticals. I gotcha. And then Matt Bryce says, Nick, this 4 Roses single barrel is delicious. But
I'll be drinking all of it.
I notice he's not bringing us any.
Bringing us any.
Come on, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm empty.
All right. So,
yeah, I thought it was interesting how he moved through the book. The progression was really kind of caught me off guard. Right, you get to the end, and he's talking about the number of checkering per per inch in the front frame of the different kinds of guns.
And it's funny because I almost wonder if he had. So I would love to meet Brian Enos and pick his brain on stuff, and then
you should have him on the show.
Yeah, if I can find him. But one of the things that he says throughout the whole thing is like, gear doesn't matter, where you place it doesn't matter, it's all in your head, blah, 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 blah. Here's the kind of checkering I like.
Yeah, he got right back to the fundamentals.
I think he had a contract of this must be 185 pages.
Like, look
thanks,
at that.
buddy.
Gracias.
You're man.
So, yeah, it was interesting that he went there after saying so much about the gear doesn't matter. But I think he said that in the context of mindset, right? Mm-hmm. That your gear isn't. Like you said, when somebody's brand new, And you see it all over Facebook. You see it all over the posts. You know,
I'm going to shoot my first three-gun match.
Shoot my first match. What should I bring? Yourself. Bring yourself. Try that out.
Everything you want is wrong.
Because everything you're going to get is wrong anyway. You may as well see what everybody else is shooting, and you know, then you can figure out as you go along what you really want. But I think from what he was talking about there was more from the context of when it comes to your mindset, you can give Jerry Mitchell any gun. You can see it. Right? I mean, you can give the guy any gun, and he's going to shoot it. And he's going to outshoot everybody else out there with it. That's not what's important. It's that mindset. It's that the skill sets are so ingrained, and they're the right skill sets. And so it's that, to me, the big takeaway in this whole thing as a competitive shooter is to do everything in your power to lose the negative effect of adrenaline. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
And that was something that, you know, we dealt with in law enforcement. I mean, there was nothing worse than having some rookie in on a pursuit, right? Because you knew that guy was going to mess up. When that guy finally crashed out and that bad guy took off running.
So everybody's
right?
getting
All of the veterans were getting out. They're getting ready. They got their guns out. They're ready to set up a perimeter. And here comes a rookie running from the back of the pack, chase the guy down. And everybody's like, oh, this isn't going to go well. Right? So it's that adrenaline you get to where you just can't think. And you know, you see it in a microcosm in competitive shooting. You see it in a very narrow sense.
Brings up an interesting thought. What if it's not the people, it's not the shooting, it's the adrenaline dump that we're all addicted to and why we keep coming back? And if we can mitigate that in our shooting, then we just don't care anymore.
I don't think it's that you don't care, but I think that's what you see in the guys who are really at the top tier. You know, I mean, Michael and Lance started the Dissident Arms team, and Nick and I came on later. And Michael is a freaking spider monkey. I mean, that guy is wound up like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he is just he is right below the surface. And whenever we've seen Michael shoot his
sleeps
best,
really well.
Probably, because he's wound up all day long, you know. But that's just Michael's personality. And to his credit, he knows that, and he's done so much with, you know, he and Land did the 50,000 round year, right, where they went to one of Max Michel's workshops, and then they went to another one. They started working with him, and they did 50,000 rounds was their goal in pistol shooting in 1 year, right? I mean, that's a lot. You're shooting 1,000 rounds a week. Land's hands were just ate up from his pistol. I mean, you're
like
just
not even looking.
Yeah,
sideways into the berm.
You know, I'm going to shoot 1,000 today.
Just because.
But Michael understood that, and when I've seen Michael shoot his best is when he's right below that surface, right? I mean, he's right on the ragged edge, but he's relaxed. And you can tell when he's going to smoke a stage because he'll get up to the line and he just goes. But if you see him bunch up, there's going to be a train wreck coming. I mean, there just is. And when you watch him, if you watch him tone it down just a little bit at the beginning.
Peanut gallery's nodding their heads over there.
Because they all know.
They've all seen him shoot.
They've all seen. I mean, it's amazing when a guy hammers a stage. It's just blistering fast, and I mean effortless. And then when he tips just a little bit over the edge, and that adrenaline starts to get him, it's a train wreck. I mean, he's at that edge, and I've learned a lot from him. You know, how do you get to that edge and maintain it? And, you know, for people like Michael and me to a lesser degree, it's more how do you back off of that edge.
Yeah. And I was talking to him about that last week, or I guess it was at the Vortex match, about when he would cross that edge and he would start missing, or he'd have a malfunction. And, you know, we all do it. You got to shoot faster, right? Oh, I just lost 3 seconds, so I better make it up. Well, I think he has, or at least from a conversation standpoint, he's been able to tone that down and know that you're not going to get that 3 seconds back. All you can do at this point is to shoot your game. So I think if you're able to realize that and then not amp yourself up, not get that was smooth.
I was avoiding the mic.
Oh, that's all of your pants.
I know. Looks like
really awkward.
At least it wasn't all over here.
But he's really been able to identify that, and we were talking about it. And for me, you know, I'm able to take that and put it in the back of my mind and know that if I mess up a reload, or I mean, like at the Vortex match, it was stage 2, where you finish on the rifle.
Yeah, so that was start with the shotgun, shoot pistol, finish on rifle.
Yep. And I had a pretty good run going, and went to seat my mag, which, you know, you're carrying your rifle on the back, so you're pulling it out of the sling, go to seat my rifle, and come up, and the mag falls out. I was like, all you can do is you want to go grab it
We've
and
never
insert.
done that.
I know. It's the first time it ever happened. But after talking to Michael, it was weird because that was
in your head.
in my subconscious, and I knew that I wasn't going to get that time back. And I inserted the magazine, racked it, and I think I had one makeup shot on the rifle.
Oh, wow.
And so for me, it and again, after reading this book, I felt like the Vortex Shooter Source match for me was kind of the first match to be able to apply some of the material that I've read, and I had a lot more fun in shooting. And I was talking to Josh Loganbill about it a little bit because we shoot for Falcor, and he's like, man, you just gotta have fun again because you kind of go through these periods of where you stress yourself out, you create so much tension. You just have fun,
dude. Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and I've discussed it on the podcast multiple times. Is like it got to a point last year where it's like I'm not even having any fun anymore. I don't know why I'm going to next match, and it resulted in. I don't say it resulted in, but I DQ'd right when I was having those feelings, and I'm sure that wasn't the reason. It was just I tripped over a stick. But
well, again, I mean it comes down to what Enos talks about in the book of existing in the moment in that particular shot right then and there, not projecting forward into the future of what's going to happen, and not focusing in the past of what has happened.
Everything is right now.
Everything is right now.
So existential.
It is, and it's crazy when you look at it. But again, like I said, I mean, immediately I connected with that first chapter because this is what I teach. In trading, you cannot focus on what you made or lost on the last trade or what you think you're going to make in the future on this trade. You focus on what's happening right now. Interpret the information and respond accordingly. And it's kind of funny you mentioned if you're shooting at a berm, you feel like you're wasting ammo.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got 50,000 extreme bullets sitting in here. I mean, it's not like there's a shortage of ammo.
Nice plug, by the way.
You like that?
Yeah, that was smooth.
You want to bring them over
Don't
here?
throw your back out.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got all the ammo, you've got all of the equipment, you've got everything. That's why you're there.
Yeah.
And it's the best use of your time, not. It's not just shooting steel. It's not just shooting paper. It's what you're doing when you're shooting. And it's that idea of not projecting it forward and not focusing on what's happened in the past. And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, you drop a mag in a stage and you're like, oh, God. And, you start focusing on that and it throws your whole game off. Or, I got to get this one so that I can get to the shotgun. And what ends up happening, right? I mean, you're shooting the pistol array at that same stage. You had the 9, steel out there, and you're going through the steel. And I was looking at the video, and I was just hammering away. And I remember consciously thinking, Jerry's words, don't admire your work, right? Just get to work, just get the job done. I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing pretty good. And then I got, to the last 2 or 3, and I was like, okay, after this next one, I got to dump the pistol and get the shotgun. So I'm trying to think ahead.
Thinking of the future.
And threw 3 shots on that last target because I'm not focused on this shot, on this particular right now in the here and now. And what Brian talks about, being present, shooting in the present tense.
And I think that makes it even harder for 3-gunners, right? Because it's not just pistol. This book is focused on pistol. So, like you're saying, you may start with pistol, but then you've got 2 other guns that you've got to go through, and you've got a long array of shotgun targets. You've got some long-range rifle that you're trying to remember what the distances are. Mm-hmm. So 3-gun just takes it to that next level, in my opinion.
And you'll see it when people do what Brian's talking about in here and just shoot in the moment. When Lanny shot that stage at Vortex. I mean, you talk about that was the embodiment of a shooter being in the moment. I mean, Lanny Barnes gets up there, and she just almost 1-for-1 on 20 targets out to 600 yards. I can't remember who was calling shots for her, but he told me, he was like, I couldn't even get the distances out to her before she had broken the shot and was on to the next target. It was amazing, but if you watch that, everything about her was calm, it was smooth, it was execution. When she moved from the first array to the second array, it was 2 or 3 steps, and she was there. It was low, she was quick, she was there. I mean, it was just in the moment. And that, to me, I mean, that's the goal. That's where I want to get to, is being every shot, you're shooting it in the moment, not worried about whether you missed it and you're doing it as a makeup shot or you hit the last 18 of them. I mean, she gets down to like the last 2 or 3 shots and everybody's like, oh my God, is she going to be able to? And she wasn't. She was the only one up there on that platform who wasn't like freaked out that she had just basically gone 1-for-1 on 20 shots out to 600 yards. And I mean, she had like 64-second time on that.
Yeah, that's
I mean, there was nobody who was even close to her.
It was smoking.
And that was, to me, that was the definition of shooting in the present tense.
Absolutely.
In three-gun.
And as Rob Hall says, we are at now. Everything that's happening now is happening now. So it's tough to think like that when you're in the moment, though.
You should write that down.
Kupika had a good one earlier. I think Brian Enos is actually a force ghost and only exists in the spiritual realm.
I could see that.
I can see that too. Rob Hall says, I listened to Enos' book via Audible on my way to a match in Indiana. That's kind of funny. You got the abbreviation for Indiana, so it looks like in a few weeks ago. Anyway, in Indiana a few weeks ago, it amazed me the first time I saw muzzle flash and actually noticed my brass leaving the ejection point in practice. Yeah.
I think if you could listen to this, maybe a section that really is meaningful to you, especially the Section 1, awareness and focus.
Yeah.
Listen to that on the way to a match.
I was going to put it on my iPhone and listen to it while I shoot.
Let me know how that goes for you.
Yeah. Now you're not in the moment, right?
Right,
Exactly.
You're doing the opposite.
Exactly. You're doing the opposite.
And Crispy334 says, thanks for putting this together. I look forward to more of the 3-Gun Show book club. This book gives me some insight into the mental game and or that can be applied even for new shooters like me. Well, good. I'm glad I could speak to you there, Crispy334. And HP Jeep says the Logan Bells for the win.
Yes, for the win.
For the win.
What's up, Josh?
Well, guys, we've been going for about 90 minutes here. Let's wrap this up with a final thought, and then I've got a little passage I want to read from the Enos book to finish it up. And let's start with you, Nick.
Okay. For me, the biggest takeaway was the tension aspect. I mean, for me, the awareness and focus and how that relates to the tension that I was creating, that was the biggest win for me out of this. And it showed in matches. I mean, it was from shoulders to arms, and I know I've mentioned this, into my core, and just how much more fluid it was from the draw stroke to shooting to being aware of or trying to be aware of the front sight and the lift and the movement. That was the biggest takeaway for me, was the tension aspect, and just kind of having it melt off, feeling like it just melts off your shoulders and down through your arms and out your fingers.
I'm looking forward to implementing that myself.
It made a big difference for me.
And Bill, how about for you?
I think just like Nick said, a lot of it was the tension. I think as shooters, you reach a point in your education and your learning where you've learned the technicals, you've learned the fundamentals. This is that third leg to that stool, right? So if you're just trying to shoot based off the technicals and the fundamentals, you're going to be an okay shooter. What takes you to that next level is the ability to take all of that, execute all of that subconsciously, lose the tension, erase or eradicate a lot of the negative results of the adrenaline dump that we all get when we get to a stage, and be able to control that and then just shoot in the moment. Just shoot the match. Trust yourself, have faith. You're going to approach this from one of two places, faith or fear.
Right.
You either have faith that you're going to execute the plan that you've walked 3 times before the stage started, or you're going to execute this from a position of fear that you won't. And if you do that, and I can't even tell you how many times I've shot an entire stage, get to the end, and hear that RO go, "If you're finished," and I'm like, "What? What did I?" Right? I mean, you just have that self-doubt, and then you look and missed an entire plate rack at the regional 2 years ago. I mean, the thing was freaking painted orange, and it was 40 yards out in front of us. Visually, I never saw it.
Right.
Never saw it because of the effects of the adrenaline. And how you overcome that is, again, that idea of approaching this from the position of faith in your training, your education, your skill set, and most importantly, in your mindset that you're going to execute this and execute it correctly the way that you've walked it. If you walk that stage before you get there, you're going to execute it that way if you'll let your subconscious mind guide you. But if you force your conscious mind to execute instead, you're going to make mistakes. Brian says, if you are thinking in terms of words, you're not visualizing. You can't visualize in terms of words.
That was a huge one
that
for me.
was. And so if you visualize in terms of pictures, and stop with the conscious thought process. Oh, I got to shoot this one, and then I got to focus on the front sight, and then I've got to drop this gun here. That's for your walkthrough. That's for programming your subconscious mind. Once you get to the line and you take that breath and you let all that tension go, you just let yourself shoot the match, shoot the stage, shoot that one target. For new shooters, what I would say is take what you can from this book more from the perspective of the progression of your learning. Learn the technicals. Learn the basic fundamental skill sets. And then start to move into the mindset, right? And what Brian says is true. Your mindset and your physical is together at the same time.
Yeah.
They got to grow together, right? So to me, that's what it was, is just that idea of being in the present tense, shooting it in the present tense, and trusting your subconscious mind to guide you. It's something I do every single day in the market, and for whatever reason, before reading this book again, I couldn't do it in a match. Right? I couldn't do it in execution to be able to say, no, I'm going to trust my subconscious. My subconscious mind will get me from my house to my office without me giving it any thought.
Yep.
And there are stop signs and there are idiots on the road, and I'd never have to worry about that. Why am I all bound up about, well, I've got the plan in my head, now I have to think about it? No, I don't. I just have to execute it. And so that, to me, was the big takeaway.
I love it. For me, the takeaway, there's multiple, but the big one that I keep coming back to is the obsession with the mental game. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe I'm placing too much on that, and also placing too much pressure on my mental game. And
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and it's damaging my ego not to have all that shit in check, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Likewise.
yeah. So I think a little bit of relaxation and forgiveness to go, but the final thing I want to read from the Brian Enos book is the very last thing that he writes in the book, and what he says is, everything in this book could be wrong. Check it out for yourself. It is you who has to learn. You won't learn by copying an idea. You have to experience it yourself. When you become the experience, you will have learned, possibly without understanding.
That was huge.
Holy
And I
shit.
thought that last line for new shooters is massive.
Yeah.
That you would learn possibly without understanding, because I think we tend to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to know why it works. We
That's
want to
me
know
right
why
there.
the light turns from red to green, instead of the fact that you should just go when it turns green.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that whole idea of learning without understanding, that to me, for new shooters and veteran shooters alike, that summed it up. Could not have summed it up.
Absolutely. And it's something I deal with every day in the podcast. Like, I don't need to know like how all this shit works. And you saw when I was trying to figure out the audio for this, is like most of the stuff I don't know how it works. I know I get the drop down. It has to be that. I don't care why. But well, guys, thank you for participating in this with me. This is the longest and most thorough prep I've ever done for a podcast. Actually, reading a book and making notes and stuff. And I appreciate you guys putting in the time to do that.
Absolutely.
To make it great
Absolutely,
for
yeah.
the
Glad to
audience
do
as
it.
well. So thanks for being a part of it. This has been the 3 Gun Show, brought to you by Armalite, and that's it. If you have any comments or anything, hit us up, and have a great evening.
Peace.
Good times.
Wait. And cut.
I probably needed that. I don't think we recorded the first one.